Hello, and welcome to my podcast, Good Grief. My name is Dr. Christine Malone, and in this podcast, we talk about trauma, tragedy, and survival. In each episode, I will interview someone that has gone through grief in some way, and we will discuss the impact it has had on their life. By sharing these stories, we hope that others won't feel alone should they be going through similar situations. Enjoy. There it is. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. My guest today is going to share her story of having lost her brother, and then we'll talk a bit about what she's made of her life since then. So, guest, if you would please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Mary Kay Kemper, and I am an entrepreneur. I'm a speaker, I'm a mentor and a coach, and I am a single mom to three beautiful children, ages 18, almost 16, and almost 14. I live in the New York area, outside of New York and Long Island. And I'm a future author. I'm putting that out in the universe now.
Yes.
I am working on my very first book. And I manage a team of about 15,000 people in the network marketing industry in a beauty and makeup company.
Right.
And
Okay.
we have a very large team and a large organization, and we generate over $70 million a year in
Cosmetics.
skincare.
You said
Yeah,
cosmetics, skincare. Oh, great.
cosmetics and skincare.
Big industry. Big industry. I'm certain.
Huge,
I was just
huge.
reading an art article earlier this morning on the way that our society is very youth and beauty obsessed. So it was kind of like, I thought, yeah, it kind of feeds into that whole thing where, yeah, well, the industries like yours definitely would thrive on, the cultural norm of, people need to look a certain way or whatever it might be. But skincare is it's a big deal, not just the
It's
cosmetic.
a big deal. But I'll share with you really quickly that really what I love about the industry I'm in, and I'm really passionate about helping women to really feel beauty within.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I say I'm selling more confidence than I am makeup and skincare, because I'm very, very passionate about women and helping them really embrace their light. We all have it. We all have that limitless potential within us, and we're all filled with magic. And I really, the way I coach and mentor my team is to really go there, right? Like figure out, how is life occurring for you? How do we help you live your best, most inspired future? And of course, use makeup and skincare as the platform for that.
Sure.
But really helping them uncover their greatness is really what I love about what I do.
And I know you're going to talk a bit more about mentoring later. I can't wait to hear more about that. But let's
Yeah.
start. Tell me about your brother. My note says that you called him your best friend. So tell me a bit about him.
Yeah. Mm. Well, it's always challenging. He's been gone 22 years. My brother Michael, at 29 years old, we lost him on September 11th, 2001. He was on the 89th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. And for any of your listeners out there that, death is awful and unexpected in all cases, even if it isn't expected. I put that in quotations. Even if it is expected because there's an illness or something along those lines, it's never actually expected, right? And with my brother, gosh, he went to work one day and never came home, right? So it was certainly the most unexpected loss. And he was 29 years old, as I said, and he was really at the prime of his life. Had just taken a new job, as a matter of fact, on the 89th floor. He started a brand new position at a brokerage firm by the name of Keefe, Bruyette and Woods. And he started that job on July 22nd of 2001. So he was only there just a few short weeks. And as a matter of fact, on that dreadful, awful, tragic day, I remember saying, I'm not even sure where he is. I didn't even know North Tower, South Tower, what floor, you know. So yeah, he was my best friend. We both lived in the city. I was working on Wall Street as well at the time. I worked for JP Morgan Chase, and my job was Midtown Manhattan.
Mm,
So we lived about 3 blocks from each other in New
yeah.
York City at the time. I was 2 years younger than Michael. So I was 27 at the time of his passing, and we were living the good life. in our 20s and single and working on Wall Street and, seemingly had, life was so good, right? And we had like his friends were my friends and my friends were his friends. And I never was allowed to date his friends, but he was certainly allowed to date my friends. And I don't know how that happened, but that happened. And so we just shared a lot in common, and we had a very, very special bond as a brother and a sister. Um, and I really looked up to him. He was a natural born leader.
Hmm.
I always called him the Pied Piper because people wanted to follow him. Like wherever he went, people wanted to follow. But
Yeah.
he was the most humble of human beings.
Yeah.
Never for a moment would you ever even, I don't know if he ever knew how much of a leader he actually was, but he was the one, wherever Michael Duffy was going to be, everyone wanted to be. And I used to always say that, as long as I'm Michael Duffy's sister, I'm someone in this world,
Oh, it's good.
because he was just that full of life. He lit up a room when he walked into it. His smile was absolutely just, could just stop you in your tracks. Um, and he was just an extremely good human being. And I've heard a lot of stories of people that we lost on that day, and they all seem to have that same special, like they just were up to big things, and they just were these beautiful souls that were taken from us way too soon.
Yeah. Now you mentioned, like an expected death, which I call that anticipated grief rather than, immediate surprise one. But in your case, you've got the added part of this being a terrorist attack and a crime and a horrible thing done to our country, and the people involved. And I cannot imagine that there wasn't some anger there as well. So I know with a lot of grief, especially if no one quote unquote at fault, maybe not as much, but certainly in a case where this is just so egregious, I would imagine that that anger had to be part of it too. Did you find that you needed to kind of get past that or get through that, or how did that work for you?
I'll be really honest with you. I did not, believe it or not, experience any anger.
Hmm.
Um, I separated the actual historical American, on American soil historical event
Yeah.
from the death of my brother. And it's so hard for me to explain that,
Yeah.
but the best way I can explain it is I could not allow the magnitude of that event get at me. I kept them very separately. And that was sort of a defense mechanism that I think is what I use to help with my grief. It was one thing to deal with my brother's never coming home. And there was a whole nother thing to deal with the enormous national, worldwide historical event of everyone wanting to feel a part of it,
Yeah.
which I think you can understand too.
Yeah.
Um, it was very hard for me. That is more what I think I had anger for, is everyone wanting to feel a part of it
Right.
and wanting to, know somebody or feel connected in some way when, you're so personally affected by it.
Yeah.
Um,
I've actually never thought of that before, but that you make an amazing point with that. I mean, it's kind of like grief is very personal,
Very
and
personal, but
you,
everyone wanted to
yeah,
make it
yeah, and you have
theirs.
the quote right to, grieve this very special person. And it almost feels like people are kind of, horning in on that, right? They want to be part of this grief process too. And I get it. I get it. I get it. That was a horrible, awful event, but still, I completely understand what you're saying. It's like this was my brother that I lost. This was my loved one.
Yeah.
This was mine. And you didn't know him. Those, to other people, that kind of thing. I can see that being part of that. So thank you for sharing that. So tell me, I mean, from the very young age of 27, how did things go in the aftermath? I mean, how did you get to the point where, you were able to, I don't know, I hate to say put this behind you, but become at peace with what's happened and you've lost your brother and so on and make some sense of it.
Well, the up till that day, I had never really experienced much loss in my life. Yes, at that point, I had two grandfathers that had passed away, but again, they lived long lives. They were in their 80s, that sort of thing. So and I lived a somewhat sheltered life of this happens to other people.
Right. Yeah.
This doesn't happen to me. I mean, that is really, I had this sense of entitlement
Hmm.
that my life was not going to have those moments. And I mean, I say that now, but it really was how I felt at the time. I wasn't prepared for life's hard knocks, like life's reality.
Yeah.
I lived a beautiful childhood and all the wonderful things. And there was this moment of, this doesn't happen to me.
Mm.
This is not, so, you, and again, there was with the nature of the event, there was a lot of time where you were holding hope, and that was a very complicated time for me in my grief process. There's so many stages of grief, but denial being obviously one of the very first stages, right? And I kept saying, absolutely not. This is not, it was a nightmare, and I was going to wake up and it was going to be okay. Or we were going to find him in a hospital in Hoboken, New Jersey, or, he was going to turn up. And so we held hope as a family for probably longer than maybe we should have. But, you know, thinking back to those days, I think what that really helped me to do was connect to how I was feeling, to really have a moment of just connecting to how I'm feeling. As you can imagine, my home was chaos. There were people in and out and every single day and all hours of the day. And so much love was being poured into us and people bringing food and all those things. And it's as if you're in a movie, it's as if you're in this movie that's never going to end. Right. And the way I really the way I think, and again, it's a day-to-day process. It's a day-to-day, like you just don't know. Today, am I gonna, be a little more accepting? Today, am I going to cry my eyes out? Today, am I not going to be able to get out of bed? Today, am I going to feel, in victim mentality of woe is me and why is this happening to me? And life is so unfair. Because there was a lot, and I have to be honest with myself and say this, there was a lot of victim mentality that I was really exerting at that time. And I was using it as an excuse to just forget about life.
Yeah.
And, like, well, I lost my brother and I get to do this. I get to be, you know, useless. I get to not want to get out of bed today. I get to not, and I do remember specifically there was a moment where I really felt a very strong connection to, I have to live my life for two people now.
Hmm.
That, and I don't quite frankly know exactly where that came from, but it was several weeks after, and we finally had a funeral for my brother. And as you can imagine, there was hundreds,
Yeah.
if not thousands of people paying their respects. And I remember an old childhood friend who came up to me on the line and she was sharing, her memories of Michael. And I said to her, I would much rather a life with him and live with this grief than a life without him.
Yeah.
And I don't even know where that came from. Just weeks after, this devastating loss. But I felt my brother. I felt him with me. I knew right away he was gone, even though the family was holding hope.
Yeah.
I knew right away. I mean, the moment, I saw the plane, because I was sitting at my desk on the 11th floor of 270 Park Avenue, and I watched the second plane because he was in the South Tower. I watched it hit the second building. I knew right away that a piece of me was gone.
Yeah.
A piece of
Yeah.
me was gone. And the person that I was on September 10th, 2001 is gone. I have to now become a new version of myself.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And I looked at my life like that, like pre 9/11, post 9/11. I mean, everything was compartmentalized into those two buckets.
yep. I've had many people over the years, when they experience intense grief, ask me, when am I going to feel like I used to feel? And I always feel kind of bad because I always say, you won't, you aren't, you can't go back. You can't go back to what it was like before because this thing happened. And it's like you mentioned, like in my cases, I used to think, well, life before this, and then life during this, and then life after that, or whatever it might be. Because I again, yeah, like you had to become a different person. Maybe didn't had to, but I'm going to say chose to become a different person in many ways. So tell us a little bit about that. So kind of how have you changed since your brother's death? I mean, what have you absorbed from that that's made you into who you are today?
Yeah, because you do have a choice, right? You do have a choice. And every day as human beings, we make several choices. And, for me, it's like you can choose to come from love or you can choose to come from fear.
Yeah.
And that was very alive for me. And, to be honest, I was 27 when Michael was killed. It wasn't until I was almost 40 years old that I really started to digest the enormity of the loss. Okay. So
Mhm.
I shared at the beginning that being in that victim mentality was a very big part of, and I had to really have an awareness around that. I had to really look myself in the mirror and say, how long are you going to use this as an excuse for your life? you
Yeah.
know and I stayed on my job on Wall Street for, gosh, 7 more years. I left Wall Street in 2008, but living a very default life. Living, I always refer to it as I was surviving. I wasn't really living. I
Yeah.
was just like, this is what's been dealt. Okay, it is what it is. But I wasn't showing up for life at
Yeah.
all. And, again, just feeling like entitled to act that way,
Right.
feeling like, well, you know, I'm not going to go on because I don't know how to go on. And my worth was really wrapped up in Michael Duffy's sister. I mean,
Mm.
that was truly like at that point in my life, I did not know who I was. And I honestly believed that, well, I'll be okay as long as I'm Michael Duffy's sister because he's someone. So if he's someone and I'm his sister, then I must be someone too, if that makes any sense.
That makes sense.
My
Makes sense.
my entire worth was wrapped up in his existence, and then he gets ripped from my life. So I had no idea who I was, absolutely no idea. And I just went on with this default life and working where I was supposed to work at 29 years old, met a man, got married at 30, had my first child at 31, my second child, just what was expected of me,
Right. Right.
right?
Going through the motions.
Going through the motions, but numb,
No, I got
absolutely numb. And not realizing it. You don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? Until you start to really come out of this and say, I've got to make a choice here. I've got to get a hold of, who I am, what I'm here to do, and really look at life as I get to live for two people now. I get to really embrace his legacy. As I said, he was this natural born leader. Like maybe there's some of that in me too, you know? And I really started to channel his energy. I mean, I feel my brother every single day and I include him in my life. So he's not here physically on this earth anymore. But he's very much a part of me in a spiritual way.
yeah. No, I
Um,
I get that at all. I get it
you
always.
get
Yeah.
that.
No,
And,
I get
and,
it.
and that's really like how I manage my grief now from day to day is by talking to him. But to answer your question, what I really did, and again, I was almost 40 years old when I started to ask the questions. And this was the beginning of sort of my spiritual journey and sort of realizing that like I can still have access to my brother if I choose to let him in, right?
Mhm.
And I remember talking to a friend and saying, I just don't feel him. I just don't feel him because I didn't know how to feel him, right? I didn't know, but I knew I needed help going on this journey of who am I and what am I supposed to do in this world and how do I start to live an inspired future instead of this default future that I'm living currently.
Yeah.
And I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, so I had left Wall Street in '08, continued to grow my family. I was a stay-at-home mom, in an unhappy marriage, and not even feeling any joy. I mean, I was void of joy. And I said to my friend, I can't feel him. I can't access him. And at the time she said, well, what if there's like a sign? If you see this thing, then you know Michael is trying to communicate with you. And I thought of the most outlandish thing, something that I'd never, ever, ever laid my eyes on before. And I said, okay, a dragonfly. If I see a dragonfly, I'll believe that my brother is with me. Well, wouldn't you know, within a week, there was an enormous dragonfly flying around my garage.
Yeah.
So I want your viewers to understand that, or your listeners, I should say, to understand that their loved ones can communicate with them if they're open to it. I really do believe that. And I know for some people religiously that might not be something they believe in, but
Mm.
I just have to share it as part of my story. So I finally started to really feel him. And at that point was when I really relied on him to say, what is my purpose? What should I be doing? And he led me in the direction of this leadership role at this company. I mean, if you would have told me I was going to go into the network marketing industry selling makeup and skincare, I would have told you you're out of your ever freaking mind. I mean, it was the farthest thing from what I thought I was good at or that I had a skill set for. I was extremely intimidated by anything, big out there in the world. As I told you, I was living this life that others expected of me. And I had no idea that I was this leader. I had no idea that I could lead a team of tens of thousands of people. I had no idea that I'd be speaking on stages, but I what I did was I didn't worry about how, and I just allowed myself to go on this journey of who am I? And really, having my brother alongside the whole way. And I started to uncover things about myself that I just didn't know were in there. I had no idea, right? And I think that this is really what the basis of my work is now, is
Right.
to really, for the number one thing is like, it's never too late. It's never ever ever too late to say I want more, or to go on, a journey to find ourselves, or
Yep.
to shift the script and say I'm going to try to not be as sad today. I'm going
Yep.
to try to step into some more courage today. I'm going to try to be a little more courageous in my ability to see the beauty around me in the world.
Yeah.
Um, even though I have this grief within me, because it's a
Yeah.
part of us, and
It
it's
is.
actually a beautiful part of us, and it makes us compassionate and have empathy and really relate to
Absolutely.
people on a completely different level.
Absolutely.
That is so beautiful. So
And
yeah, so he led me to this.
you described your brother as quite the leader. And what I'm hearing is
Yeah,
that you kind of absorbed that, he sort of became part of you and maybe channeled that through you to say you are a leader as well and to realize that that's part of who you are too. So that's a beautiful story. I absolutely love that. So tell us,
yeah.
I know you do a lot of mentoring now. So tell us a bit about, kind of what that's all about. What do you do? Who do you help?
I do. I do. So, obviously my business is network marketing, and it's makeup and skincare, and we're in the beauty world and all the things. But really what I'm passionate about with my particular style of mentorship is to really unlock that magic that's within each and every one of us. As I described to you, was living this very default life, and everything was kind of told to me because that was the generation, right? That was sort of the way that my family dynamic was. This is the religion you're going to have, and this is the
Right.
political party you'll vote for. And, so I'm really passionate about helping individuals to just not only, own their greatness, because I think everyone to a certain level does that, but to really ask those questions of, how is life occurring for me? Is this as good as it gets? Is there more for me out there? And then, helping them to see and supporting them through, yes, you can do it. And if you can see it, you can be it, as long as you want it enough, you
Yeah.
know? and really holding that space for people. And I think that's one of my superpowers. And um, one of the things that I know I have so much gratitude that I get to do, that people trust me in that way, where, I think we all need support in this world. We all need somebody who looks at you and says, I believe in you and I see something in you. And my brother did that for so many people. And that is definitely something that I have embraced and that he has channeled with me, is that really beautiful ability to see somebody and see, the beautiful light that's within them, and the gold that's under all the stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know? We all have circumstances, we all have childhoods, we all have stuff that we go through. And it's this armor that we continue to put on ourselves that blocks our light, and my brother just had a beautiful way of really not just seeing people, but listening and, being that beautiful sort of example of you're the most important person in the room,
Mm-hmm.
um, and
And
looking
helping
at
them
somebody
uncover that.
saying,
Yeah, helping people uncover that. I mean, and see it
having people
themselves, right?
cover that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the fact
they
that you can
matter.
see it as graduate, but do you helping that other person see it too is also part of that gift, I'm sure.
Yeah, and that people understand that their life matters. And when they make a choice, there's a cause and there's an effect.
Yeah.
And that choice affects somebody. And when you know that, you live your life a little more intentionally, right?
Yep.
From a place of love and not fear as much as we can,
Yeah.
There's a part of us, and it's there for to keep us safe as well.
Yeah.
But just, understanding that we can move past fear and get to love. And my brother was just a beautiful example of that on this planet. And I know that that continues in the beautiful place he is now.
Yeah. No, it's been an absolute pleasure hearing your story. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we end today?
Well, I would just like your listeners to really understand that what they're going through, what they're feeling, whatever their story is, because grief is so personal, to just be kind to yourselves.
Yeah.
Allow yourself the time. Don't rush anything. Don't feel like I'm taking too long with this, or I shouldn't be feeling this. I always say to people now that are grieving, stop shoulding all over yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. Do what you need to do,
Yeah.
to get to that next place. But you know I just feel like I have to say this in the most loving of ways. But when we can look at the loss of our loved one as an opportunity to really embrace something spectacular that they can help us uncover when asked, when we just allow them to, and welcome them into our lives in a very different way,
Mm-hmm.
it really is a very peaceful place.
Yeah.
And I do believe that my brother lived a very full life for
Mhm.
29 years here on this planet. Um, and yeah, I hope your listeners will just allow themselves that space to just be, to
Yeah.
just be, and
Yeah.
don't should
Yeah.
anything.
Don't stop. Get rid of the should. I like to tell people to give
Yeah.
themselves some grace. Give yourself some grace. You've been through stuff, and there's no perfect way to do these things. So, give yourself like you would anybody else. Give them some grace for what they're going through. So, I also want to tell you, you're always going to be Michael Duffy's sister. So you didn't lose that. That's
I know. I know. And gosh, I really mean it. I shared with you before we hopped on here about a story of pretty early on after losing Michael, saying, I'm going to be a better version of myself because he had to give his life. And it affected our loved ones
yeah.
in a very negative way. They were not ready to hear that. They were
Mhm.
very angry with me, with that statement. But I really live that way every day in Michael's honor. And
Yep.
I hope I make him proud every day. And I really know that because he had to sacrifice his life, that I am being a better version of myself every day. And that is something, that's a gift that I can give him,
Mhm.
right? I can't get him back.
Right.
Obviously, that is what we would want. Every one of us would want our loved ones back. But that's not possible. But what is possible is for us to do courageous things and say, I'm going to be a better version of myself
Yeah,
in their
it
memory.
doesn't take away from who he was and the memory of him. It just simply says, I'm learning from him, I'm taking from him, and this is what I'm going to take with this and become. So I think it's beautiful. I really do. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I'm impressed that you hit there so early on after your loss, because that's not something you see quite so soon, and probably why some of your family members were impacted. They weren't ready to, as you mentioned, they just weren't ready to hear it. But hopefully they've gotten a piece of that as well in their lives. Well, Mary Kay, thank you so much for being my guest today. I've absolutely loved hearing your story about Michael, and how your life has just been an absolute legacy to him. And that's an amazing gift.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Good Grief. To hear more about my personal story, please pick up a copy of my book, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival, available in paperback, Kindle, and Audible via Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other online book retailers.